So with all the discussion what we had with the criteria of the partial functions as far as your Scala is concerned, one of the very interesting fact about your Scala like languages is it has the facility of nested functions. Okay. Now, majority of the times, people have one kind of wrong notion about nested functions. Like, if a function is returning a value, we can call that particular function in another function. Do you agree with me? So, calling a function with a nested concept is different from designing the function as a nested function. Be very, very clear about that. So when you deal with nested functions, you should always understand actually the rule of the fundamental programming says that the definition of a function can never contain the definition of another function. Be very, very clear about that. So by general programming principles, a function's definition cannot contain the definition of another function. Okay. A function's definition cannot contain the definition of another function by basic principles. 2. In object-oriented programming principles associated with the functional programming style, we can create the definition of the function within the definition of another function. Okay, be very, very clear about that. So within one particular function's definition, we can always have the definition of another function in object-oriented programming principles with functional programming style. So you should always remember one thing, the third point, when a function is defined inside the definition of another function, we call it as nested function. Okay, we call that construct as a nested function. Be very, very clear about that. Where the inner function is called as nested function, working under the scope of the outer function. Am I clear with you? It's basically working under the scope of the outer function. Be very, very clear about that. Four, Scala being a functional programming style language provides the facility for the declaration of one function's definition to be part of another function's definition, where the number of nested functions defined in Scala, nested functions defined in the, I'll make it more simple, the definition of another function without any limitations. Okay, there are no limitations that are kept by Scala anywhere as far as its documentation is concerned. Be very, very clear about that. Okay, so the fifth is the outermost function is called as parent function, which treats all the inner functions to be under the influence of local scope to the parent function. Okay, so all the inner functions are working under the local scope to the outer function that is fundamentally available. Be very, very clear about that. So with respect to normal functions, whatever you discuss in the same criteria, the code block of a nested function can be used within that particular piece of the functional scope any number of times. Are you catching the point? Following the general principles of the functions concept, the inner function can be called within the scope of the outer function any number of times by scenario of the requirement. Okay, be very, very clear about that. Now this concept you should not misunderstand to the criteria called as recursion. Recursion is totally different once again, what we will be seeing in the next levels. Okay, so what is the basic advantage of the nested functions? the fundamental advantage of the nested functions is one, we can localize the operational code from external expose if not necessary. Okay, whatever kind of operational logic is there with respect to the inner function, that logic is within the scope of the outer function only. It is not exposed at any point of time. Am I clear with you? Am I clear? The second thing you can just watch, the second thing is, as the nested function is in the local scope of the outer function, it is easy to detect any operational errors and these errors get localized to the outer functions scope. Okay, so we are just localizing any kind of misbehaviors within that particular piece of the function itself. Third is, nested functions will enhance the code detection and increases the level of modularity. See, whenever I feel that a particular type of operation is not essential beyond the scope of this particular function, then instead of keeping that function on the global scope, I'll make it become local to that particular piece of the function where its operational restrictions should be applied. Are you getting me? The fourth point is, nested functions increase the clarity of further development in the application and makes the redesigning of the code much easier. Without any side effects in the application scalability. Okay, so technically, when you're going for any kind of application scalability, it becomes much easy for you to really start working out on the process, because you cannot expect any side effects to take place because of your scalabilities that are fundamentally applied. Are you catching the point? So you should always try to understand the rule with which it is basically demanded. So the basic syntax. So we are just going with the def. I'll just say parent function. Now I can just say here the operational code in the scope of the parent function. Okay. Are you getting me? So this is the operational code in the scope of the parent function. Be very, very clear about that. Now you can have any number of operational statements like that, but technically you can just watch. I can start my own definition once again. Okay. I'm saying child function 01 because to just tell you that any number of functions can come to the criteria of the scope like this. And I can just say like the operational code in the scope of the child function. Am I clear with you? Then we are technically trying to close this and then we are closing it. So you should understand that this inner function can never be exposed outside. This inner function is never exposed outside. It can give services only within the scope of the outer function. So outer function, if it wants the services of the inner function, it has to call the function by relevance of the requirement. Am I clear with you? So it's just a construct of understanding. Now you should always understand this concept in Scala makes you get into the kind of understanding of the memory scopesman. Okay, it just makes you get into the construct and composition of understanding the memory scopes. So because the inner function scope is basically to the level of the outer function, the net amount of resource usage and all these things will get highly reduced. Am I clear with you? So it's only the construct of your understanding through which you need to get through the process. So just watch here. I'll start with very simple implementations. Then we'll start moving down with the other corresponding standards. Okay. So just watch carefully. So I'm just trying to go with my operations in the main message function. Okay. I just want to say I'm designing another function within the definition of the outer function. You just watch very carefully. And I'm just trying to say this is once again unit. Then I'm just trying to say println rather than saying main function, I'll just say parent function. Okay, that will become more easy for you to understand. That's closed. Okay. Now, if you really want to use any particular function, then I think we have to call the function. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with me? Only when we call the function starts operating. So this inner function can be operated or it can give you services only when that particular function is being called, only when you can call that particular piece of the function. Try to understand that particular factor very clearly. Therefore, the scope of this function is absolutely within the outer function, but until you do not call, even the outer function cannot see into the definition of the inner function. Am I clear with you? So now you just watch very carefully. I am saying I'm just making my submessage function to be called there. Then I'm closing it here. Okay. Now I'm just trying to say println. Okay, I'm just saying that the main part of the application of Scala gets initiated here. So this area where you call your main message function. And you know very well that whenever we call a function, what happens? Whenever we call a function, what happens? It jumps to the location where its definition is existing, suspending all the other activities. Am I correct? So here also the same thing will happen, no doubt about it. Now, once you went in, it always tries to execute this line that is existing here. Do you agree with me? Now, can I directly enter into this particular definition? No. So after the second line is executed within the scope of the main function, it is coming to the sixth line and then going to the definition that is existing in third line, executing this particular fourth line, coming out of that particular function to the calling area, we don't have any other activity, so it automatically returns back to the location from where the main function has been called. Am I correct? So if your basic functional concept is clear to you, I don't think you have any kind of constructive doubts in this now. So you can just watch here. I'm just trying to say the main function has returned to the main application. Terminating the scope of the main application. Now, actually, when you're trying to save this, so we just save that particular piece of the function. Now, I'm just calling my fundamental command prompt. So I'm just going for basic execution. Now, when your particular program is getting executed, now this part is very clear. Calling the main function, message from the parent function, message from the inner function scope. Now, if you don't know the design as a criteria, we'll never know like which particular part of the code has been executing under the influence of which other part. Try to understand the construct very carefully. Therefore, whenever we work in concept of nested functions, you need to just have a clarity of the flow with which the criteria is basically operating. Be very, very clear about that. Am I clear with you? So the technicality of the construct is not difficult. The only thing is we need to just understand the rule of the scope very properly and then start working with the requirement. Am I clear with you? Now I'll just make this more specifically clear so that we can start operating. But before that, what I just want to do is okay, let us just have a criteria that the code is moving like this. Okay. Now, definitely my program execution has begun from here. your program is initiating from there. And technically it is going with the operational execution of these 3 lines. And then it's identifying or encountering a functional call. Do you agree with me? Now the rule is very clear. Whenever we basically identify a function, the total amount of the operational state should be suspended. And then we have to move towards the location where the definition of the function is available. So that's the basic flow now. Now, no doubt your main function is executing this part. Now, after that, technically it is coming to the criteria of this particular call. Now, if you're not having the fundamental sense of that a function, how it exactly flows and how it's operating, then normally we find people thinking that this is executing. That never executes directly. Unless and until a function is called, you can't do anything. The same rules will follow. So now the function is moving with that particular piece of the call. It's going there. So even the nested functions, the only thing is it's part of the definition of another function, but its calling mechanism and everything is same. Now this function is doing its work, and then it is fundamentally returning to the location where the function was called. Am I clear with you? And then you are technically trying to return to this location of the outer function. And once your job to this has been fundamentally completed, then you need to return back to the location where exactly you were called. So it's making you return there, and then you're continuing here to the level of this, and you're fundamentally terminated. So there is no basic complication behind this flow, but you always find people having great lot of confusion when they come into the nested functions. It's only with the people who are not having the basics of how the functional flow takes place. Am I clear with you? So if you are keeping this flow clearly into your mind, then I think we'll take few examples and we'll start working with the concept of the nested functions. And it's not only the nested functions, there are certain things we need to understand that are happening here which is, I can say, another step forward to understand your higher order functions. Am I clear with you? So after your partial functions, there's one more step to understand the implementation standards of your higher order functions. So exactly, let us see how we will start extending and scaling on this within the next 24 hours. Okay. Thank you very much. Once again with you tomorrow. Have a nice day. Take care of yourself. And a small piece of information before we leave, man. We are starting a Python very extensively integrated course from tomorrow in the morning at 8 o'clock. So for the next 10 classes, we'll be considering that as demo sessions, and the link is open for everybody. So there's the same meeting link for the next 10 classes from tomorrow. So we'll be sharing the link with you people, man. Please see that you are just sharing that particular link within your social media accounts and visiting my social media account on Facebook. Please see that the post that I've kept for the course called Python is shared. Okay. Please see that it's shared. Govind, big data batch, we are going to start from anywhere around 3rd week of October. And the same class is also kept on YouTube live for the demo sessions. So if anybody is having issue with connecting to select the demo sessions to Zoom, they can directly get connected to the YouTube channel and then they can start operating from there. Thank you, Venkateshwarlu. I've seen your comment. Thanks a lot for keeping faith on me, man. And it will be very nice if you people can just come onto the channel and make subscriptions. Okay, subscriptions make a big lot of change in making the channel to get promoted. I hope I can just request you that small piece of favor. Thank you, gentlemen, for all the support you people are giving. Let us see what's waiting for us in the next level in Scala. Okay. Thank you very much. Once again with you tomorrow.